Welcome to Season 3 of Unlock Your Child's Full Potential, where we focus on the mindset shifts, practical tools, and strategies that empower us to positively and effectively influence our kids.
Happy New Year, friends! I hope 2025 is your best year yet. You absolutely deserve it. Have you ever tried the practice of choosing one word to guide you through the year? Last year, I chose abundance. And looking back on 2024, I can honestly say I felt more abundant than the year before. It wasn't something I focused on daily, but just remembering the word from time to time helped me stay aligned with what mattered to me. This year, my word is serve. My focus will be on serving others, giving value and going the extra mile to help my coaching clients achieve the results they're seeking in their parenting journeys. I'd love for you to pause this episode for a moment and think, what's your word for the year? Now for a quick announcement. Starting this year, I'll be releasing new podcast episodes twice a month instead of weekly. I absolutely love connecting with guests and sharing their incredible insights and tools with you. It's one of my favorite parts of podcasting. But as a one-woman show, I've realized I need more time to focus on the moms I work with directly. Producing this podcast is a labor of love, but it's also time-intensive. So for now, we're shifting to an every other week schedule. To kick off the year, I'm bringing back one of my favorite episodes featuring the incredible Stephanie Pinto. Stephanie is an emotional intelligence coach and the author of the transformative book From Chaos to Connection. With a thriving community of over 100,000 parents, she is a true expert in helping families navigate the challenges of raising emotionally intelligent kids. In this episode, we dive into 3 key topics: how to raise emotionally intelligent children when your spouse isn't on the same page, what to do if you yourself weren't raised with emotional self-regulation skills, and practical ways to handle those emotionally charged moments and meltdowns. It's a conversation full of wisdom and actionable takeaways. I know you're going to love it. Let's dive in. Hi, Steph. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
As an emotional intelligence coach for parents, you have helped many people transform their lives. Can we start with your own personal transformation? What did your family life look like before you cracked the code?
Ooh, great question to start with. It was pretty, I could say, chaotic in that we only had one child at the time, because after we had our son, a few years in, I think when he was like a toddler or, preschooler, then I discovered emotional intelligence and everything that goes with it. So it was very frustrating to me when he wouldn't listen and he wouldn't do as I asked, and he would have these big emotions and meltdowns and tantrums as kids do. And so, yeah, I think before we saw the kind of transformation happening, which is still happening, it was very stressful. Like it wasn't awful, but parenting was tough for me. So that's kind of where it was. And I just feel very lucky that I found emotional intelligence when I did, and I started reading about it and was so curious, and I loved it, and I was listening to everything, reading everything, and and luckily having conversations with my husband. He was like open to it. He didn't think it was like weird or silly. He listened and it made sense. Yeah, just gradually started to kind of transform the way we obviously saw our son and his behaviors and emotions, but also it helped us to see each other differently, because, we also are built on emotions, and we would have disagreements or arguments, and it just really helped us to kind of understand one another, and the chaos gradually started to go away, which was really nice.
I love that. I love that it changed your relationship with your husband as well. That's a nice side effect. Yeah. As I understand it, emotional intelligence is about recognizing kids' big emotions as opportunities for parents to connect with them and guide them to becoming more resilient, independent, able to problem solve. How can we parent that way if we ourselves weren't taught emotional self-regulation skills as little? And how good we have developed them along the way is also questionable. For example, I've been yelled at when I was little. My initial response when I'm dysregulated is also to yell. Sometimes I catch myself and respond calmly. Sometimes I don't. And sometimes I'm aware of it right there in the moment, and still it's stronger than me. I know there are a lot of parents out there like this. Any words of advice?
Oh, yes, it's so common because kind of like you said, not many of us were raised with really conscious, aware, intentional, emotionally intelligent parents. It just wasn't the era. And across a lot of different cultures, I think I've talked to a lot of parents across the globe, and they will post on my community online and things. So I can see that across the board, it really was pretty common that we were yelled at and we were punished and we had, harsh consequences, and all of those kind of habits and things that I guess the parenting methods that our parents used were not from a place of emotional intelligence and understanding kids' emotions and their behavior. So it makes so much sense that now, as a result of how we were raised and the culture of our family, but also the bigger culture, no wonder it's really hard to shift our thinking and shift our way of being and our habits and our patterns, because they are ingrained in us, over so many years. And, our brain is so kind of habitual and it likes its comfort zone, and things just happen so quickly, right? You said, sometimes I can catch myself, sometimes I can't. And so it just shows how much support we need as parents to be able to start changing the way we relate to our kids and dealing with their emotions and ours, because it's not coming naturally to us. Most of us were not raised that way, right? So I do think, I love the saying that it takes a village to raise a child, because it really does. And a lot of us have lost that now.
Yeah.
But I think at least online, that's one great thing that I know the internet can be, it's good and bad, but it has provided us with the village, the people who think like us and who see things the same way as us and who want to do differently, right? It's not necessarily that, our parents were terrible and we need to do better. There's no point in kind of looking back and shaming or blaming how we were raised and things, because I know it's a cliche saying, but, our parents were doing the best that they could with the tools that they had and the knowledge they had for the time that they were in. So they didn't know about the brain development and psychology and all the research and information we have access to now. It literally was not around 30, 40 years ago. So no wonder our parents thought that to control us and to raise good kids, they needed to yell or punish and things like that.
Yeah, and there's nothing good coming from shaming ourselves too, because right now we have the information, but rewiring is still so tough, and it's a process and it takes a while.
Yes. Yeah. Have you heard of reparenting?
Yes, I've heard of it. I'm not sure if we can do it by ourselves or we need the coach and support. What's your opinion?
I think reparenting is something that we definitely need someone to kind of guide us and help us along in that process, because, well, number one, we don't know what we don't know, right? So we know how we were raised, and we might have, experiences now that make us think, I notice I'm yelling at my kids, or I notice I tend to go to a consequence like, give me your iPad, or no more phone, or no dessert, that kind of thing. But I think it's way too hard for us to develop some strategies and to implement them, to know where to go and what to do when our child does this and we feel triggered. It's very hard to self-coach in those moments. Do you know what I mean? That, like you said, the emotions, they overtake you. They are so strong and they're so ingrained sometimes. So I just think things like, therapy and coaching and support like that is where the change starts to happen. That's where the transformation starts to happen. For a long time, I was just reading and learning and books and podcasts and stuff like that. And that's like a long road. It helps. And there's lots of great stuff out there. I've written a book, so I'm not going to say they're terrible or useless. I think the transformation will happen a lot more deeply and a lot more quickly when we have someone to help us out and to guide us and show us, the things that we don't know or we can't see, and to hold us accountable. And I did it kind of the long, hard way, which is now a big part of the reason why I say to parents, you don't need to read all the articles and all the books and listen to hours of different podcasts. Like, it's too much. Go to or find someone, like this podcast who, they've kind of done the work on and the learning and the training, and they distill it down for you to show you these are the steps that you need to do. And here's how you can do it. Yes.
Yeah, I agree. It's a better way. It's a faster way. And our kids grow up so fast, so we don't have so much time.
Yeah.
We better do it now. How do you raise an emotionally intelligent child when your partner isn't on the same page? I know yours is, but there are some husbands mostly who think these methods don't work fast enough. They don't fix the issues fast enough. So they keep resorting to threats and bribery. And I'm wondering, is the effort of one of the parents enough to raise an emotionally intelligent child?
Yes, I love this question. And it's such a common one as well. And as you said, Billy, it does tend to be the mother who I coach a lot of women and I work with a lot of mums. They're more open to or on board with the different way of parenting. Mostly the dads are new to it, or it's unfamiliar, or then they're not really on board at all. So that's a generalization, but that's what I see and what a lot of parents report. There's a few things I think that kind of, drop in with me that really make a difference. One of them is if we can understand that other parent, our co-parent, or it might be an ex-partner, that they, as I said before, are doing what they can. They're doing the best that they can for your children based on the level of knowledge and the understanding that they have, which is not going to be the same as yours, or as one parent, right? Especially if one parent is reading more, learning more, and consuming more knowledge and information about conscious parenting or emotionally intelligent parenting. And if the other parent is not doing that, they're kind of in the dark. It's again, they don't know what they don't know. So of course they're going to respond from frustration. Of course, they're not going to have a handle on their emotions. Of course, they're going to think our kids need consequences and punishment because I want my kids to be kind and respectful and successful. So my husband now is on board. Like we have the same values and goals, but for a long time, we're different cultures. We're from different backgrounds. So I'm English and my parents were polite and proper and conservative and things like that. And his family are Portuguese. So they're a little bit more loud and sometimes explosive, like, not in a terrible way, but just very different culturally. So when I used to look at him and be like, why are you yelling at the kids? Or why are you so harsh on them? Like, be kinder and you're doing the wrong thing, imagine how that went down. And that just creates tension between us. And I had to remind myself and do, some learning and coaching around the fact that, he has not done the training that I have done. He hasn't read all the articles and listened to the podcasts. And I have a pediatric therapist background. So I did 4 years in university to have a degree, and then I worked with families for so long. So of course I have a different perception of our kids' emotions and behavior, and I have a different perspective. So I see things differently, and you cannot argue with someone else's perception of reality. My husband thinks they need consequences, or they're doing the wrong thing. We need to teach them. Then he believes that. He wants our kids to be, like I said, kind and respectful and do the, hardworking and things like that. We often want the same goals as our partner or the other parent, but we go about it a different way. And so kids can still learn and develop in an emotionally intelligent way if there's only one parent on board, because there's so many experiences that kids will have with both parents that they are learning from all the time. And the more that we can have conversations with our kids about why that other parent reacted that way, or why that other parent is saying that they have to do those things, not from a place of like judgment and, they can't control their emotions, that's why they yelled, you don't want to do that. But I think if we can keep the lines of communication open with our kids from a place of respect and non-judgment, but also giving the other parent as much compassion and empathy as we hope that they would show the children, right? We want them to be kinder to the kids or more compassionate or more empathetic and more understanding. And yet a lot of the time we don't give them that same grace and compassion.
Wow.
We think you're doing it wrong. Do you know what I mean? So
you hit it on the head. Yeah. You're right.
I feel like that's really profound to get parents to just reflect on, is that we often don't give that other person the same kindness and love and compassion that we wish they would be showing to our kids. So we have to, this is why the work comes back to us, and we have to first work on our own emotional intelligence before we can teach it to our kids, before we can model it to our kids, and before we can have it with another person in a relationship.
Wow, I love that perspective. So don't try to educate your husband, sending him all those podcast episodes, books. I don't think I can just deliver the information the same way as the professionals that I'm learning it from. So that's why the results are not as I want them. But you're so right. If we treat the dads with compassion, they will just feel that. Kids will see. And modeling is the best way to teach.
I do think that you made a good point. We don't want to flood our husband or the other parent, whoever it is. We don't want to flood them with like, you need to listen to this podcast and look at this book and read this. Like, imagine if they did that to us with something that they were super passionate about, like, I don't know, cars or soccer or something. We'd be like, oh my God, no. It would push us the other way, right? I don't think we can force anyone to value things the way we do, because we all are unique and our personalities are different. But if you can have a meaningful conversation with, let's say it's your husband, where you say, hey, I know that like this is really important to me, and I know it might not be as important to you, but is it okay if when I find something, or if I come across something that I really love, or that, you know, is really meaningful to me, can I just flick it on to you just so you can have a read, or just so you can look at it? It's not going to be a long article. It's not going to be a 1-hour podcast episode, and I'm not going to do it every day. But if I see something that I really love, would you mind having a look at it? And you can do the same to me. You know, it goes both ways. So I think that's a better approach, because it comes from a respectful way, and it's fair to think, could you, have a look at just a couple of things, like if I really think it's interesting or important or would help us. It's not you flooding them all the time, every day, with every little piece of information, because you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that
great point.
Yeah. And it's respectful as well. And it's showing that other person that you are mindful that this isn't something that comes easily to them or naturally. Maybe it's not something that they want to spend a lot of time reading or watching about, but that you're not asking too much if you would like them to kind of just be a little bit on board, or at least know what you're doing and respect that.
Yeah. We're so focused sometimes on our kids that we forget about our husbands, that they need the same love and connection as the kids do. Mm-hmm. Let's get practical here. I love to give parents strategies to build their toolbox. So maybe something about how do we diffuse meltdowns? This is something that's common, and I'm sure parents will appreciate some advice.
Yes, it is so common. I think it's a universal challenge of parents. And to be honest, I don't think it matters what age your child is, because even if they're a toddler, or if they're a school age, or they're a teenager, we still see meltdowns. They will look different. A teenager's meltdown might be slamming a door, stonewalling and ignoring, not answering your texts, or I don't know, of not coming out for dinner to the lounge room. You know, it might be that. Whereas a toddler's tantrum or meltdown will be physical, lashing out and stuff. So either way, if we can acknowledge that this happens across the board from 0 up, because as adults, we even have our own meltdowns sometimes.
True, yeah.
I think if we can, in those particular moments where things are like hitting the fan and it's chaotic, probably the first and best thing that we can do is dial up our own emotional intelligence. Like turn that dial up, go, okay, how am I feeling? It's got to start with me, because if I'm about to blow up as well because my child isn't doing their homework or isn't getting in the bath or whatever they are, and they're refusing, and that's getting me angry because I can't control the situation and they're yelling hurtful things. If we are also going into that red zone and we're about to yell and shout, then we're no good to anyone. We're just creating a power struggle or a fight. It never ends well for anyone, right? We feel guilty, and then our child is, I don't know, in timeout, or they get smacked or something, and no one wins. So if we can first sort of raise our own emotional intelligence and click into that and go, whoa, okay, this is big, I'm not getting anywhere, or he's calling me, he's saying you're the worst mom in the world, or whatever that is, staying calm within ourselves. And sometimes I use a mantra like, my child is having a hard time, they're not giving me one, like they are overwhelmed, they need my help, they've lost it. That's a really yucky feeling, to feel like you're completely overwhelmed and out of control and you've lost it. So imagine that for a child. So I kind of remind myself, hey, they need help, they've lost it, I need to keep calm because that's going to be the best thing for them. And I think also reminding yourself that there's very rarely is there an actual physical emergency where you have to move in fast, unless your child's running across the road, or unless they're like physically hitting like their sibling, then you can move in and separate or pull them back from the road. But most of the time it's, no, I won't do homework, no, I won't get in the shower, or, he's not sharing the iPad, I don't know. So we actually don't need to respond as though we're in an emergency and go into that fight or flight, like erupting energy. It's just stressful and it's unhelpful. So if we can keep ourselves calm, and then if we can acknowledge, as I said, our child needs our help, they need some kind of guidance here because they've lost control. What can we do or say or not do and not say so that we help our child kind of gradually come back to, you can call it the green zone, or a more state of regulation when they're calmer. Sometimes we don't actually want to say a lot, especially when there's a big meltdown. Our kids are not really receptive to anything. We could probably offer them 20 chocolates just to be quiet, and they will still go, it doesn't work because that part of their brain is offline. So sometimes we don't want to say as much. We don't need to reason and negotiate or lecture. That is unhelpful. So sometimes just being in a place of presence and love and support, and I'm here when you need me, and I know this is beyond you right now, and it's okay, like I've got you, we're going to get through this together. Not saying those things, but kind of sending out that energy, and your facial expression, your body language, all of that is going to help in those meltdown moments. Because if you guys think about it, we all probably can imagine what it feels like. Let's say a child is melting down, or maybe we were having a meltdown, and our parent, if they look at us with a certain facial expression, a stern facial expression, if they put their hands on their hips, and if they roll their eyes, and if they say, you're being ridiculous, in that tone of voice, that's adding fuel to the fire, right? So we can take away the tone of voice, we can calm our body language and our posture, and soften our facial expression. That's letting them know, I'm here for you, and I know how you're feeling is, really stressful, and you're so mad that you can't have that cookie, or that you can't go to the party with all your mates. Like if we can do that, then we're allowing the emotion to come out, which it has to do, right? It's got to go somewhere. We're allowing that to come out, but we're not, just saying, yeah, go for your life, ruin, throw the cups and plates and damage, and things like that. Well, it's called co-regulating, which is using ourselves, our body, and our presence to witness all those emotions taking over, and to show your child, despite how you're feeling, I've got you, and we will get through this, and we'll talk about it after. But right now, you got to let those emotions out with me. Like, it's safe to do that. We don't ideally want to tell our kids that they're being ridiculous, and if they keep going like that, then they get no iPad after dinner. Like, we don't want to go down, as you said before, the bribes and the threats and the punishment. Yeah, a lot of it is, how can we just let our child grumble and be overwhelmed, because in a meltdown they can't stop it if they tried. And then afterwards, there's a whole other conversation.
Where it gets tough? When there is a conflict between the siblings, between two of them. So there are high emotions on either side and maybe need different things. So how can you be there for both of them?
Ooh, that is so tough. How tough is that? Because I've got two. I sometimes think, oh my goodness, I only have two. Imagine if I had 3, 4, 6 kids, But when there's two, I have actually said to my kids when they're arguing, or if both of them want me, I say, guys, there is two of you and you both want me and there's only one mummy. This is really hard. I can't be in two places at once. Give me time to help you both. So if they are not massively, have lost it, melting down, they will be able to hear that. So I kind of pick my timing. If they are massively arguing, fighting and things, which they have been in the past, I know that I have to move in very quickly, like to separate them sometimes, but I can still do that without this fury and the anger and the yelling. I can move in calmly, but with speed, if that makes sense. And sometimes we, sometimes it's hard to do that. But I think if we are bringing that relatively calm energy in and using some language like, whoa, okay, like, ooh, let's take a pause, let's take a breather. Something's going on. You guys are arguing. I can see, you're fighting over the remote or the toy, whatever it is. Let's work this out together. I'm going to hear both of you. We can get through this. We can solve the problem. Sometimes even that me inserting myself is like enough of a circuit breaker for them to go, oh, good. Like otherwise they're just cat and dog fighting. You've got a circuit break basically. So we can do that. There still might be some, well, she started it. No, you took it off me. And then, like there's still some of that. So we have to keep ourselves calm. And sometimes I'll use my hands or a gesture. I'm like, guys, whoa, like stop. I need to hear both of you, but I can't if you're talking over one another. And I listen to both sides and we problem solve and we work it out and things like that. But it's something that, we have to kind of just juggle on the fly because every situation is unique. And our kids are most likely different ages, unless they're twins. So different ages. I have a younger, I have a 6.5-year-old and a 9.5-year-old. So I have to be careful in those situations not to go to my daughter first, who's younger, because she's often more upset. I have to be careful not to just tell off my older one because he's usually a little bit more like, I want to say like sneaky or manipulative. He'll be like, well, you didn't see that she did that thing. And I'm like, hang on, I need to hear it fairly. So how much does it fall on us to have the self-discipline to do this work, to remain calm, to like help facilitate and negotiate? It's not for the faint-hearted. I think being a parent is the biggest personal development exercise on earth.
I agree. Yeah. We're so unprepared and we grow so much in the process.
Yes.
And what do you think of just letting them figure it out, like practicing their problem-solving skills? Because you said moving quickly, but I think sometimes we just have to see how they deal alone.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So there are many times when you might think, they're arguing or they're disagreeing, but I think it's okay to let them like see if they can negotiate or see, we listen in and we think, oh, they started to say, well, why don't you take that one? No, you've had it this whole time and I've been waiting for it. Like sometimes it's messy problem solving, but it's kid problem solving. And it's not always terrible. We don't always have to jump in and say, right, let me help. Because I guess if we're doing that all the time, that's unhelpful and we're removing the opportunity for our kids to learn how to problem solve. Again, it's a bit of every situation is different. If we can hear there's like, yelling, screaming, like, I don't know, it's a very a nuanced kind of situation. If I hear like yelling or hitting, then I'm like, okay, we need to, move in. But sometimes I think there's a lot of value in waiting to see how the kids might come to a resolution. And we think, oh my God, look, I didn't do anything, And sometimes I facilitate a little bit and I go, all right, so you guys know that there's the extra ball outside. You don't have to share this one if you don't want. You could get that. Now I'm going to leave you to it and see if you guys can work it out. Call me if you need me, okay? I'll just be on my laptop. It's kind of just gradually hands off a little bit and see, then they go on themselves.
Yeah, you're right. There's a thing I've been hearing. Sometimes the emotional intelligence approach is perceived as soft and permissive. How do we hold our boundaries? Because that's important too. There are instances where the kid is rude and disrespectful, for example. How do we handle that?
Yeah, that is something I hear so much. And I get so many comments on social media, especially on Instagram, where there are, I don't know, it's just different to Facebook for me. I get a lot of people saying, this is why the next, our generation is raising snowflakes. And this is why parents are, being soft and kids are getting away with whatever they want. And, kids are ruling the roost. And I'm like, whoa, I think people see that letting your child have emotions, letting them express emotions, big ones or uncomfortable ones like anger and frustration, and maybe sadness and crying, people see that as, whoa, you've got no boundaries. It's very different to allow your child to experience and express their emotions versus expressing or using any kind of behavior like hitting and using disrespectful language and spitting, all of that stuff. There's a very big difference there. My kids will know, they even tell me if I'm getting frustrated, they're like, Mommy, you say that we can show and use any emotions and any emotions is fine. And I have to say, yes. And also not all behavior is like, we have to have boundaries around if you're punching the wall or hitting me, or not that they do, but there's a difference there. And I think people kind of blur the lines and think that if we allow this, then we're allowing everything. And as you said, that's not the case. We're allowed to, and we need to have boundaries for our children. And actually for us, like I'm still learning how to set my own boundaries because I didn't as a kid. So take some time to reflect on, well, what are my boundaries around screen time or the language that we use? What language is okay and what's not? Families have different rules. They might be a bit flexible with the language and others are like, no, we never use this word, this word, this word. So you need to know your own values and what's important to you, how you want to raise your kids, and your own boundaries around all those different areas, so that then if your child comes up to, they ask for the fourth cookie, or they start to say, you're the worst mom, you're so mean, and and then they say something, you need to know where that line is so that you can go, whoa, hey, that's not okay. If you do that, then I'm not going to respond, or I'm going to whatever. In those moments, you need to know what your own boundaries are so that then your kids know where the boundaries are too. So we kind of have a saying, if you keep moving the goalposts, then that's so confusing to a child, right? The more conviction you have around what's okay and what isn't, your kids will pick up on that. It might take some time, but a great example is you wouldn't let your child run across the road when a car is coming. No matter what they do, if they're about to go, you would grab their hand. It may be really hard too, because the possible outcome is of not having a boundary is them getting hit by a car. Not that we have to have that strength and conviction in all our boundaries. Some are more flexible, like you might have more screen time on the weekends, for example. But still, if you know what your boundaries are, it's much easier to hold them and to tell your kids when they're coming up to one, or they're trying to push it over, or they're, cross the boundary, for example. But yeah, I think it comes
What
back
about if they're dysregulated, they're having a meltdown, and that's the time when they're being disrespectful and hurtful to you? So you want to be there for them, but you also don't want them to cross that line.
So I always come back to the neuroscience of a meltdown, when our kids are really dysregulated. This is not excusing any bad language, let's say, but it's giving a reason as to why my child might use a really hurtful word for us or for whoever it is in that moment, because we know that when emotions run really high, that logical, rational part of their brain, which is where empathy is and perspective taking and care for others, all of that goes offline. They're just sitting in the thick of their emotions. They're reactive, right? They're in fight or flight. So a part of me is like, it makes sense that in those really heated, heightened moments, our kids will come out with things that they usually never ever would. And they usually know not to say, they know not to call you this or that, or to throw things, for example. And I also come back to us as adults, when we have a, quote unquote meltdown, maybe we're not throwing things, because we're more mature, but we still will yell at our kids and we will treat them like dirt and we will name call them, we have those moments. We say things and do things that we usually never, ever would, and we know is wrong or disrespectful. We do it in arguments with maybe our husband, or, you know what I mean? So I just want people to acknowledge that your child in those moments, I don't want to say not being held accountable for whatever they say or their behavior, but just know that this is what is happening physiologically in the body. When they go into fight or flight, they're going to say and do things that they usually wouldn't because they're in that sense of there's danger, there's threat, I need to react, and you're not listening and it's not fair. Like, of course that's going to happen. So anyway, in the moment, I would really not say a whole lot about like, not to speak to me like that. That is so disrespectful. You have no TV on the weekend. Again, that's going to add fuel to the fire, right? If we can dial up our emotional intelligence, just know my child is a good kid having a really hard time, and know that's not okay to say that to me, but I'm going to be smart about this and pick my time when I talk to them about using those words, what else they could do instead when they want me out of their bedroom, for example. Pick a time that they are more calm, more regulated, more receptive, and they feel more remorseful. They're more open to a conversation. And usually that's, well, for younger kids or my kids, it's tuck in at bedtime. I could say something like, hey, buddy, earlier in the kitchen when we had that argument, like sometimes my kids will cut me off and go, Mummy, I already know, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean that. And I feel really bad. And I'm like, whoa.
Yeah, they know they did wrong.
They know they did wrong because they're now at a point where they're calm. Their brain is switched back on. They're not emotional. They're feeling connected to us. So they feel, it's safer to be vulnerable and go, sorry, Mummy, I shouldn't have yelled or called you that. I just think, why aren't we being smart about when we talk to our kids and when we discipline, i.e. teach them and have those conversations? Why do we need to do that in the moment? Because that's nothing good.
The worst
ever
time
happens in the moment.
Thank you for that. Just remembering to put ourselves in their shoes, because it happens to us too. Okay, I think a great way to end this interview is I know you recently did an episode on your podcast about the messages adults wish they received growing up. So I would love to hear some of those to inspire parents to tell their kids now while it's time. So please share some.
Oh, I was blown away by some of these things that parents wrote. So I put the question in my community online and tons of parents responded what they wish they heard more of from their parents growing up. And some of the big ones were, I don't know if this is a surprise or not, I'm sorry. So a lot of us didn't have our parents apologize. They didn't admit fault. It wasn't done, it was just swept under the rug, definitely for me. So I'm sorry. Another big one was, I believe you. A lot of the time as kids, we sometimes do it now, we think that because our child is younger or smaller, doesn't know the ways of the world, that they're being silly, they're being ridiculous, they're making a big deal out of something, it's not that bad. We kind of invalidate how they see things or what they feel. But if we can actually just say, hey, I believe you, I know you're upset, I get it that you're really mad that he did that. If our parents would have believed us more, that would have really meant something to us as kids. Not blaming our kids for our emotions was one. I can't remember the way it was worded, but essentially if our parents could take responsibility for when they get angry or mad and when they lose their cool and erupt, that would
it's not you make me yell.
And that the yelling is, that's on me. Like I'm emotionally hijacked. I've lost my cool and that's why I yell, right? So I think if we can take away from that if we can be honest with our kids, if we can apologize when we are wrong or when we do something we shouldn't have, admitting fault and being more vulnerable. I think people hate being vulnerable. I still have to really practice at saying, I'm sorry, buddy, I shouldn't have got so frustrated. I didn't mean to, talk over you or whatever it is. I think those things, and just kind of validating our kids' emotions and experiences, no matter if we wouldn't see it that way or if we don't agree with them, we can just accept that this is how they feel and we can go from there. So a few big things that was really interesting.
Those are great. What a wonderful way to end the conversation. Thank you for being such a ray of light. You're such an inspiration. Would you tell people about your new podcast, the book you have published, and the amazing Facebook community?
Thank you. I would love to. So my podcast is still very new. Only started in November and it's called the Emotionally Intelligent Parenting Podcast. I share a lot of personal stories as well on that. My Facebook community is called Let's Raise Emotionally Intelligent Kids. And there's just over 100,000 parents in there from all across the globe, which I love, love, love. And my book is From Chaos to Connection. And so that was published in February, and that's on Amazon. So you can get that wherever you get your books.
I'll put those in the show notes. Thank you so much for being here, Steph.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Billy. I love your work. I think this stuff needs to go out to parents everywhere just to support them. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening and letting me be a part of your day. If you enjoyed this episode or the show in general, please consider rating it and leaving me a review. Reviews are literally the lifeblood of a podcaster and help me so much. Have a great week, and I'll see you next Wednesday.